"No!" was the word that awakened us. "No!" being shouted in a man's loud voice from every house on the block. "It can't be! No! Not for President of the United States!" Within seconds my brother and I were once more at the radio with the rest of the family, and nobody bothered telling us to go back to bed. Hot as it was, my decorous mother had pulled a robe over her thin nightdress. She, too, had been asleep and roused by the noise, and she sat now on the sofa beside my father, her fingers over her mouth, as though she were trying to keep from being sick. Meanwhile, my cousin Alvin, able no longer to remain in his seat, set about pacing a room 18 by 12 with a force in his gait befitting an avenger out searching the city to dispose of his nemesis. The anger that night was the real roaring forge, the furnace that takes you and twists you like steel, and it didn't subside, not while Lindbergh stood silently at the Philadelphia nostrum and heard himself being cheered once again as the nation's savior, nor when he gave the speech accepting his party's nomination, and with it the mandate to keep America out of the European war. We all waited in terror to hear him repeat to the convention his malicious vilification of the Jews. But that he didn't made no difference to the mood that carried every last family on the block out into the street at nearly 5 in the morning. Entire families known to me previously only fully dressed in daytime clothing were wearing pajamas and night dresses under their bathrobes and milling around in their slippers at dawn as if driven from their homes by an earthquake. But what shocked a child most was the anger of men whom I knew as light-hearted kibitzers or silent, dutiful breadwinners, who all day long unclogged drain-pipes or serviced furnaces or sold apples by the pound, and then in the evening looked at the paper and listened to the radio and fell asleep in the living-room chair. Plain people who happened to be Jews, now storming about the street and cursing with no concern for propriety, abruptly thrust back into the miserable struggle from which they had believed their families extricated by the provincial migration of the generation before. I would have imagined Lindbergh not mentioning the Jews in his acceptance speech to be a promising omen, an indication that he had been chastened by the outcry that had caused him to relinquish his army commission, or that he had changed his mind since the Des Moines speech, or that he had already forgotten about us, or that secretly he knew full well that we were committed irrevocably to America, that though Ireland still mattered to the Irish, and Poland to the Poles, and Italy to the Italians, we retained no allegiance, sentimental or otherwise, to those old world countries that we had never been welcome in, and that we had no intention of ever returning to. If I could have thought through the meaning of the moment in so many words, this is probably what I would have been thinking, but the men out in the street thought differently. Lindbergh's not mentioning the Jews was to them a trick and no more. The initiation of a campaign of deceit intended both to shut us up and to catch us off guard. "Hitler in America!" the neighbors cried. "Fascism in America! Stormtroopers in America!" After their having gone without sleep all night long, there was nothing that these bewildered elders of ours didn't think, and nothing they didn't say aloud within our hearing, before they started to drift back to their houses, where all the radios still blared away, the men to shave and dress and grab a cup of coffee before heading to work, and the women to get their children clothed and fed and ready for the day. And we'll pause there.